Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, could I invite you to take your seats? It's 9:29 and we would like to start this morning's session punctually at 9:30. I know that the excellent military disciplines that guide most of you in your daily lives will equally guide you in the organization of this morning's meeting, that we want to start precisely on time so that we can offer the maximum amount of time to our speakers and to you to engage in dialogue this morning in our two plenary sessions. I'd like to open this morning's session to thank, on behalf of all of you who were able to attend, President of the Republic of Singapore, Tony Tan, the staff of the Istana and the Rajaratnam School of International Studies for having been our excellent hosts last night at dinner at the Istana. It was a splendid occasion, and personally I want to add a special word of thanks to President Tan for his very warm remarks made on the occasion of the 15th IISS Shangri-la Dialogue. As most of you know, he was the Minister of Defense of Singapore in 2002 and the person with whom the ISS most closely worked to make possible the first Shangri-la Dialogue, an experiment in defense diplomacy that has now happily been transformed into an institution of defense diplomacy. This morning we have two plenary sessions, one on the challenges of conflict resolution, the other on pursuing common security objectives. As is traditional at the IISS Shangri-la Dialogue, we allow the ministers to interpret liberally the exact titles of these plenaries. They are really made as an opportunity for them to give personal expression to their thoughts on the defense and security priorities in the region as seen from the perspective of their countries. And we're very delighted to have a representative from Europe, from Southeast Asia, and from Northeast Asia at this morning's plenary. And I will ask them all to speak in the order in which they appear in the program, introducing them briefly now. First to speak will be Jean-Yves Le Drian, the Minister of Defense of France, who's been a very loyal and persistent participant in the IISS Shangri-la Dialogue since he was first appointed Minister of Defense by President Hollande, coming to his first Shangri-la Dialogue only a few weeks after he took office as Minister of Defense, and since then has come on a very regular basis, and ensuring that the French delegation in general was always very strong and committed. We're equally delighted to have Senior Lieutenant General Nguyen Chi Vinh, the Deputy Minister of National Defense of Vietnam. We find it particularly important to have Vietnam at this year's fourth plenary, owing to the greater interest that attaches to Vietnam's role in the region, one that has been highlighted also through the visit that President of the United States Obama paid to Vietnam, which resulted in part in the announcement to relax the previous arms embargo held against that country. And finally, we're delighted to welcome for his second consecutive appearance at the Shangri-la Dialogue, Admiral Sun Jingguo, the Deputy Chief Joint Staff Department of the Central Military Commission of China. I enjoyed the opportunity about a month ago to meet him in the Ministry of National Defense in Beijing, and we had an hour of substantive discussions on the importance of the Shangri-la dialogue to China's own defense diplomacy, and I'm delighted that he's here to present the perspective from the People's Republic of China on these questions. And now that the room has so elegantly and quietly settled, and I have your full attention, could I please invite Jean-Yves Le Drian, the Minister of Defense of France, to take the podium.
Merci, cher John.
Thank you, John. Minister of Defense of Singapore.
Cảm ơn
Ladies and gentlemen.
ISS, chính phủ Singapore và ban tổ chức của đối thoại Shangri-la lần thứ 15
Studies.
dành cho chúng tôi sự tốt điểm
15th edition of the Shangri-la Dialogue, and also the Singapore government for its warm hospitality. It is an honor for France to be present at this vital meeting for security in Asia. For me personally, as John has just said, it's the 4th time that I have had the pleasure of being here in this room. I'm proud to have established the continuity of France's attendance here.
Pháp là một quốc gia ở châu Âu, thế nhưng mà lãnh thổ của quốc gia này cũng như là chính trị của quốc gia này thì có vị trí ở châu Á và châu Đại Dương. Ngày nay 85%.
France is a European power, but it has territories that are geographically and politically in Asia and Oceania. Today, 85% of our exclusive economic zone of 11 million square kilometers, which is the second largest in the world, is in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. More than 1,600,000 French citizens live in this zone. We maintain a permanent military presence of 8,000 men and women who are responsible for the protection and security of French territories and for the control of our exclusive economic zones. These forces also take part in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations for local populations, in the fight against illicit trafficking, and also in defense cooperation activities with our main allies and partners in every domain. Being at the heart of this area, Asia is a key driver of dynamic economic and demographic growth and technological innovation, and is of decisive importance for global prosperity. But at the same time, it has vulnerabilities. Therefore, for me as Defense Minister, the question of Asia-Pacific stability is not a theoretical issue. It is a concrete concern that mobilizes entire parts of my ministry in the fields of strategic analysis, regional assessments, dialogue and cooperation with our partners, intelligence, planning and operations. Thinking about the conflicts in the Asia-Pacific and their resolution means thinking about the conditions under which stability in this region is possible. I can see two main conditions which I would like to discuss with you: order and change. Stability depends on a political order. This order is the fruit of a historical process that has translated into the architectures, institutions, and legal and political arrangements that guarantee an enduring framework for human activities. But this order is not static. It can evolve. That's why the second essential condition for stability is, paradoxically, change, or more precisely, adaptation. In other words, the process by which change can take place without generating catastrophic instability. For change and stability to to go well together, various basic ingredients have to be combined, of which 3 seem to me to be of primordial importance. Firstly, the rule of law. This aspect is of particular importance when considering the challenges of regional maritime security. The principle of freedom of navigation, whether at sea or in the air, to which France is deeply attached, is a crucial issue. Last week, the heads of state or government of the G7 underlined their attachment to a rules-based maritime order in accordance with international law, as stipulated in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. This matter is of the utmost importance, and not only for stability and security in the region. If the law of the sea is not respected today in the China Seas, it will be threatened tomorrow in the Arctic, in the Mediterranean, or elsewhere. In order to continue to contain the risks of conflict, we must defend the law and defend ourselves through the law. This is a message that France will continue to repeat in international arenas. It's a message that France will continue to put into practice by sailing her ships and flying her aircraft wherever international law allows and operational needs require. Several times a year, French Navy vessels sail through the waters of this region, and this will continue. Since the beginning of this year, for example, the French Navy has already deployed 3 times through this area. We do this to defend our national interests and our security, to implement our defense partnerships, and to contribute to regional and international peace and security. This is why we ensure this permanent and regular deployment in the area. The second indispensable ingredient is dialogue and the peaceful settlement of disputes based on mutual trust. The establishment of dialogue between countries with opposing territorial claims is more necessary than ever. On this point, France, like many other countries in this room today, regrets that there has been no substantial progress in recent years on the South China Sea Code of Conduct between the countries concerned. Finally, the third key ingredient, in my view, is firmness. We must remain firm in the face of actions that undermine the rules-based order, firm vis-à-vis those who refuse law and dialogue. As the defense minister of a country whose armed forces are engaged in a large number of overseas theaters, I can assure you that this firmness comes at a price. But we have no choice if we wish to preserve order and security. This resolve is, firstly, a question of political will. It applies to transnational terrorism, which is not only rife in the Levant and in Europe, but it also affects Asia. In addition, in Asia, this resolve is also called for in dealing with North Korea, whose actions constitute a threat to international peace and security. For France, alongside this principle of firmness is reliability. In the same way that we are a reliable and rigorous ally of our allies in Central and Eastern Europe in the context of the crisis that Russia brought on in 2014, playing our full part in the reassurance measures and in the future enhanced forward presence on Europe's eastern frontier. In exactly the same way, we stand alongside our main partners in this region of the world. With India, of course, which has been our main strategic partner in Asia since 1997. With Malaysia, which is a historic partner in Southeast Asia, of course. With Singapore, a recognized anchor of stability in this part of the world. And also with Australia, with whom our defense cooperation will be considerably expanded in the years and decades to come, both in the naval field, but also beyond that. In this regard, I'd like to add that the reinforcement of our defense relations with Australia rests upon an increasing convergence of interests, as demonstrated by our joint presence in a number of operational theatres. In this globalized world, there are no local or regional challenges, only shared challenges of varying intensity. France, by giving itself the means to defend its interests and by playing an ambitious security role, intends to contribute to maintaining stability in the Asia-Pacific. To be effective, this contribution can only be conceived through the notion of complementarity, side by side with our partners, in particular India, Australia, the United States, Singapore, Malaysia, and Japan, among others. France also wishes to develop new partnerships with all ASEAN countries, and this afternoon I will actually be flying to Vietnam to enhance our defense cooperation there. France is a European Union country, and the conditions that I've outlined, namely respect for the rule of law, the quest for dialogue and firmness when the rule of law is violated, are at the heart of the responsible multilateralism that, in France's view, should characterize the actions of the European Union. That is why, for instance, the situation in the South China Sea directly concerns the European Union, and not only because we have an economic interest in maintaining the freedom of shipping, of navigation there. Therefore, could we not have the European navies coordinate in order to ensure as regular and as visible a presence as possible in maritime areas in Asia? Soon I will be detailing this proposal to my European counterparts, and I hope that at the next edition of the Shangri-la we will be able to measure progress made on that together. The long-standing ties with our Asian partners are getting closer, and France will continue to work towards regional security in every dimension. France is well placed to know that the international crises that are developing directly affect our own security. The Indo-Pacific area is fortunate to be, on the whole, preserved from open conflict. France will play its full part in our collective responsibility to preserve and to reinforce security and stability in this region. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much for citing the importance of the primacy of law, the centrality of dispute resolution, the need for firmness that can often have a price, and for describing the diversity of defense relationships that France enjoys in this region, a diversity that France is building on shortly also as a consequence of your visit to Vietnam. So with that preface, it's a pleasure to invite the Vice Minister of Vietnam to take the floor.
Thưa Ngài John Chimon, thưa toàn thể quý vị, trước hết tôi xin gửi tới toàn thể quý vị lời chào của Đại tướng Ngô Xuân Lịch, Bộ trưởng Bộ Quốc phòng Việt Nam. Do bận công việc nên không thể tham dự đối thoại. Tôi xin cảm ơn ban tổ chức và nước chủ nhà Singapore đã mời.
I'd like to thank the organizers of Shangri-la Dialogue for your kind invitation extended to me so that I could participate and have an opportunity to make some remarks at this plenary sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, as the importance of Asia-Pacific, the driver for the world economy, against more weight, Southeast Asia with the ASEAN community, coming into being has also contributed its positive parts, helping expand integration, facilitate linkages, and intertwine bonds of interest. More importantly, ASEAN has been taking the leading role in the current and emerging regional security architecture. As a result, the region continues to see peace, stability, cooperation, and development as the mainstream. However, lately there has emerged new sources of complexity which deserve careful examination. These include terrorism, nuclear proliferation, dispute of territorial maritime borders, and issue of maritime security. To name just a few, are the rising non-traditional security challenges. The worsening security environment actually is rooted in the clashing interests, power emissions, and strategic competition that are going downhill and derailing from the track of international norms. Added to this is a mismatch between actions and words. The inequality and practice of double standards in dispute settlement, followed by some countries in pursuit of narrow self-interest without considering other interests, nor those commonly shared by wider regional and global community. If left unaddressed, I believe these negative and unpredictable factors shall erode peace and stability, fuel confrontations, leading to armed conflicts. In a globalized world as the one we are living in with the boom of advanced technologies, conflict, if happen, be it of any nature or at any scales, partial or total, intra or interstate, ethnic or religious, political or economic, environment-driven or cultural-driven, low or high intensity, and in the worst case, armed conflict, would have its disastrous consequences amplified and easily spill out of control, impacting not only involved parties, but also the wider regions and the world at large. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, no country, big or small, ever desire to be in conflict. The question is why the worsening trend is on and why security challenges piled up. Why are the topics as conflict preventions and conflict resolutions capturing our attention and making us feel uneased? And that is the topic of the theme that I'm speaking today. An easy answer is, in a self-truth style, is that the paradox exists due to the difference in awareness of what constitutes common interests. Because of the failed international laws which may not be respected or conformed from time to time, or as a result of ineffective mechanisms of cooperation, diplomatic legal means, which are weak in both efficiency and enforcement when it comes to conflict resolution. In such a context, I think that we need to have a better holistic answer, that to seek for a dialectical explanation to go beyond the ostensible facts and figures, tracing the root of cause and with an aim to transform conflict successfully. The rule in our world is that there exists both cooperation and competition. In our world, cooperation and competition coexist, opportunities parallel challenges. Development and progress are only produced only when both sides of an entity, positive or negative, shall be satisfactorily tackled. The same principle is applied to conflict resolution, for which we need both cooperations and constructive processes. In a diversified and multipolarized world, it is impossible for us to gain and sustain peace and prosperity without resorting to contest as a means. However, to win a contest necessitates means of cooperation. Therefore, I would like to stress that it is a must for nation-states to maneuver their cooperative and competitive process in struggle for settling differences and resolving conflict. Cooperative mechanisms are targeted for trust and confidence building, mutual respect for legitimate rights and co-development, while competitive negotiation aim to achieve common viewpoints, interests, differences. In such interaction between cooperation and competition, countries can take them as standard for parties to refer in settling, minimizing the escalation. It is natural that countries engage in their cooperative and competitive activities with basic aim to maximize their national interests, considering this as their fundamental goal or top priority in national building and defense and international relations. However, national interests should be viewed and achieved in a principled way, which should be well-grounded on justice, in harmony with legitimate rights and interests of other nations and of the international community. Practice of coercion and unilateral should be avoided, especially when they show no respect for interests of other parties, when they jeopardize peace and stability in the region and the world. promoting cooperation via multilateral institutions such as the UN, or closer to the region, security mechanism as ARF, EAS, ADMM, and ADMM Plus offers an important venue for prevention and settlement of dispute and conflict. Let's bear in mind the utmost importance of unity and centralities of regional organizations such as ASEAN, as well as the role of responsibilities of members and partners, especially the responsibility of major powers in preserving peace and upholding justice. The Shangri-la dialogue today is a typical testimony for the reasoning of cooperative and competitive struggle in settling differences and preventing conflict for a peaceful and stable region and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in response to the recent complex development in the regional security, Vietnam has adopted consistent foreign policies that firmly adhere to our core principle of independence and self-determination. This is also a fundamental principle in cooperation and struggle for development and in settling disputes and differences. Vietnam will continue to base on our own strength in defending our national interests and take no side with anyone to go against another. At the same time, we advocate transparency, respect for community interests and opinion when it comes to share security concerns in the region and the world. With regard to the East Seas or South China Sea issues, the fact is there exists between China and Vietnam and some other ASEAN claimants differences and disputes. But the situation recently has developed in a worrying trend that escalate beyond the difference in words of claim. There have been activities of unilateralism and coercion, changing the status quo on the ground, risking militarizations of occupied features for deterrent power, which invite the response from both within and outside regions. This development, if not addressed properly, will lead to armed races, rivalry, and unpredictable and disastrous consequences. Vietnam has a policy of taking perseverant determination in defending national sovereignty and in territorial integrity, safeguarding maritime flight security and safety first and foremost by peaceful means, in accordance with international laws, including the UNCLOS 1982, the DOC between ASEAN and China, taking sincerity in negotiating for timely conclusion of the COC. At the same time, we will continue to strengthen our cooperation with China and other involved countries to build and consolidate confidence in search for common strategic interests. In so doing, we also try to have the constructive struggle, and we hope that together we will arrive at solutions that are acceptable to all within the permit of law and universally recognized norms. Such an outcome shall be welcomed by the international community as a positive contribution to the regional and global peace and stability. Ladies and gentlemen, as a country and a nation state, Vietnam has experienced many wars in the history of national liberations and reunifications in gaining independence, peace, territorial integrity. The people of Vietnam is well known for being peace-loving, patriotic, ready to sacrifice for their nation's freedom and independence. The just cause of Vietnam has also been supported by the international community and the world people. However, as war become the past, right now, in this very minute and hour, every family, every people, every inches of our homeland are struggling with the prolonged and serious aftermath of wars. We therefore has a very strong desire for the long-lasting peace. It is the peace in freedom and independence, with sovereignty and territorial integrity, bringing about happiness and prosperity for people, and contributing to the peace, security, and stability in the region and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude my remarks here at the Shangri-la Dialogue by quoting some of the famous words of our late President Ho Chi Minh, the great leader of Vietnamese people, the great man of culture. More than anyone else, Vietnamese people are sincere in their desire for peace, for their simple cause of life. To achieve peace, we must adhere to the principle of equality, non-interference into each other's internal affairs, non-aggression, mutual respect for national sovereignty, and independence. The people of Vietnam has a strong belief that all the disputes in the world can be settled by peaceful means, and that despite differences in social regimes and ideologies, we can all live in peace together. I thank you for your attention. Vâng, xin cảm ơn Ngài Thứ trưởng vì những cái lời cảnh báo.
Could result in future in a regional arms race, and also for your pledge against the background of Vietnam's tragic recent history of war to stretch every sinew to solve issues diplomatically as much as possible. Thank you very much for those remarks. It gives me now great pleasure to invite Admiral Sun to take the podium. Admiral Sun, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Mr. John Shipman, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm sorry that because I've been busy in the last couple of days for consecutive meetings, my voice might be a little coarse. It gives me great pleasure to come to Singapore once again to attend the Shangri-la dialogue. I would like to thank IISS and the Singaporean government for the kind invitation and hospitality. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you the policies, practices, and proposals of China and the Chinese military on strengthening Asia-Pacific security cooperation and promoting regional security governance. The world today is undergoing historic changes as never before. Multipolarization and economic globalization are gaining momentum. The interests of all people around the world are interlinked and intertwined. The Asia-Pacific countries share good times and bad times together. The region is home to 40% of the world's population and contributes 57% of the world economic aggregate and 48% of the global trade volume. It is a region with the fastest growing economy, the biggest development potential, and the most dynamic regional cooperation. The Asia-Pacific countries are strengthening cooperation and capacity building. Landmark progress has been made in the ASEAN community, and a comprehensive, multi-layered, and multifaceted regional cooperation framework has been formed. The Asia-Pacific countries face common security opportunities and challenges. The Asia-Pacific security environment is stable in general, but strengthening military alliances and military deployment invites security risks to the region. On the Korean Peninsula and in Afghanistan, the security situation remains bleak. Disputes over territorial sovereignty or maritime rights and interests escalate from time to time. Threats such as terrorism, cyberspace security, and nuclear proliferation are on the rise. The Asia-Pacific civilizations blend in harmony. In the host country Singapore and in other ASEAN countries or elsewhere in the Asia-Pacific region, mutual accommodation, communication, and learning among societies and cultures are vibrant. we offer mutual support, and we stand up together in face of transnational challenges such as terrorism, climate change, natural disasters, and spread of disease, etc. Peace, prosperity, and stability in the Asia-Pacific region are hard-won. It is a result of the unswerving adherence to peaceful development, equality, mutual benefit, and win-win cooperation by countries and peoples in the region. Today, the Asia-Pacific countries have constituted a community of shared destiny, interdependent and inseparable. A bright future for the Asia-Pacific region has to be facilitated by common development and underpinned by common security of all regional countries. To promote common development, China has put forward the Belt and Road Initiative and set up Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the Silk Road Fund. To safeguard common security, China advocates a new security outlook featuring inclusive, shared, and win-win security cooperation of all. Not long ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed at the opening ceremony of the CICA Foreign Ministers meeting that the Asia-Pacific countries should jointly build a security governance model that suits the characteristics of the region. From the defense and military perspective, China believes that countries in the Asia-Pacific region should work together in the following respects to promote security governance. Promote security governance to serve peace and development, the theme of our times. Peace cannot be more precious. Peace and stability represent the trend of times, while development and prosperity represent the common aspiration. The prospect of world peace and development is better secured if all countries stick to the path of peaceful development. One should abandon the outdated zero-sum mentality. Replace confrontation or monopoly with win-win cooperation. Address the reasonable concerns of others while pursuing one's own interests. Respect the security needs of others while safeguarding one's own security, and join hands in promoting peace and stability in the region. The Chinese military is committed to world peace and regional stability. Among the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, China is the largest contributor of peacekeepers. Its contribution to UN peacekeeping funds has risen to the 2nd place in the world. We are earnestly implementing the promise by President Xi Jinping at the UN Peacekeeping Summit in September 2015 to speed up the formation of an 8,000-strong standby force. On June the 1st, before I came for the dialogue, the Chinese engineering contingency in Mali suffered a terrorist attack. 1 Chinese soldier died and 5 were wounded. Those wounded soldiers are still in hospital. Last year alone, 129 UN peacekeepers sacrificed their lives for the peace of the mankind. Since December 2008, the Chinese Navy task forces have provided protection to over 6,100 ships in the Gulf of Aden, half of which are foreign ships. Over the past 10 years, the Chinese military has participated in 27 international humanitarian emergency relief operations, offering 24 countries with aid worthy of 1.23 billion RMB. We have actively assisted developing countries to strengthen their national defense without imposing any political preconditions. Currently, the Chinese military is undergoing a holistic and revolutionary transformation. A total of 300,000 servicemen will be downsized. I believe there is a huge difference between the Chinese military and the advanced militaries in the world, in that military expenditure per capita for a Chinese soldier is only some $60,000 compared with $200,000 to $300,000 for either an American or British, French or Japanese soldier. So the Chinese military must push forward with reform, raise efficiency, strengthen capacity building, and speed up development. China holds high the banner of peace, development, cooperation, and win-win, while pursuing a national defense policy that is defensive in nature. China has no hegemonic ambition. The Chinese military, as a result of reform, will enhance self-defense and defensive capabilities and render more accomplishments towards regional and international peace and security. Promote mutual communication and learning among civilizations, thus laying a solid foundation for security governance. Diverse ethnicities, religions, cultures, as well as multiple social systems, development paths, and economic strength coexist in the region. Asia-Pacific countries have different perspectives and concerns over security issues. China opposes linking terrorism to a particular religion or civilization. Rather, we would facilitate dialogue and exchanges among civilizations for inclusiveness and mutual learning, advocate harmony with diversity, and support transforming the diversity and differentiation of civilizations and nations into vitality and mobility, so as to set the Asia-Pacific region as an example of peaceful and harmonious coexistence. The Chinese Ministry of National Defense and the Chinese military actively carry out all-round international exchanges and mutually beneficial cooperation, deepen mutual confidence with other countries, and constantly enrich and expand exchanges and cooperation programs. We are committed to building a new type of China-U.S. defense and military relations featuring mutual trust, cooperation, no conflict, and sustainability. We are constantly deepening the exchanges and cooperation in humanitarian aid and disaster relief, peacekeeping and counter-piracy, etc. Recently, The two sides, along with others, are preparing for the participation of RIMPAC 2016. Between China and Russia, the military relations are maintained at a high level. The two sides held the first joint computer-based missile defense war game recently. Pragmatic cooperation has been further deepened. In light of the important consensus of building a community of shared destiny reached by the Chinese and Pakistani leaders, the two militaries are steadily enhancing and expanding regional counterterrorism cooperation. The Chinese and Indian defense and military leaders have exchanged visits within 6 months, jointly ushering the bilateral military relations into a new phase. China-Japan defense exchanges are in the process of being restored.
Seek mutual understanding and accommodation through dialogue consultation, and initiate the concept of security governance. The jungle law goes against the trend of the times, and belligerence does not make peace. Rather, it is mutual understanding and accommodation that brings about stability, and upholding justice ensures lasting security. In dealing with the complex regional hotspot issues, the relevant parties should keep calm, strive to safeguard peace, promote amity and confidence, enhance rule-based and institutionalized crisis management and control, ease tension through confidence-building measures, and diffuse crisis by political means, so as to find solutions in a step-by-step manner. The Chinese military, while resolutely defending sovereignty, security, and development interests of the nation, is committed to properly handling differences, jointly controlling risks, and peacefully settling disputes with the countries concerned. The Chinese and the U.S. militaries have completed the U.S.-China Memorandum of Understanding on the rules of behavior for the safety of air and maritime encounters, enriched the mutual notification mechanism on major military operations, and improved communication among Navy Air Force flight-line commanders and pilots. The defense ministries of China and Japan are working on the maritime and air communication mechanism. China and India have actively conducted exchanges and jointly maintained peace along the border. Not long ago, defense ministers of China and Vietnam had a border meeting again, reconfirming that both parties shall build a harmonious border. At the China-ASEAN defense ministers' informal meeting held in Laos last week, China proposed joint exercise with the militaries of ASEAN countries in 2017, with such themes as code for unplanned encounters at sea, maritime search and rescue, and disaster relief of Zhenjiang. Moreover, China has always insisted on denuclearization, peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula, and solving the issues through dialogue and negotiation. China will, along with the international community, comprehensively and completely implement the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, and actively seek to bring the Korean nuclear issue back to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, we oppose U.S. plans for the deployment of the THAAD system in the Republic of Korea, which will undermine regional stability. Develop the security architecture suitable to the region, and strengthen the security governance mechanism. The Asia-Pacific countries should refuse the Cold War mentality, deepen and expand security cooperation featuring no conflict, no confrontation, no targeting against a third party, mutual benefit and win-win. A new model of engagement should be formed which stresses dialogue other than confrontation and partnership other than alliance. We should strive for an Asian approach for mutual respect, consensus, and comfort to all. We should strengthen coordination on regional security issues through various mechanisms, unite and work together to address challenges, and gradually form a cooperation pattern which meets the security needs of the region. The Chinese Defense Ministry and the Chinese military actively participate in regional multilateral security dialogue and other cooperative efforts. We work together with the SCO member states to deepen defense cooperation, deter the three evil forces, thus jointly maintaining peace in Central Asia. China strongly supports the centrality of ASEAN in East Asia regional cooperation. China is the first country to hold defense ministers' informal meeting with ASEAN. China is fully involved in pragmatic cooperation in all areas under the framework of ASEAN Defense Ministers' meeting, plus it has actively contributed to related joint exercises. From 2017, China and Thailand will act as the co-chairs of the next counter-terrorism expert working group. We shall join hands with ADMM Plus to promote pragmatic cooperation. Meanwhile, China, together with the militaries of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, is evaluating the possibility of establishing an anti-terrorism cooperation and coordination mechanism in order to intensify measures against terrorism in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, at present, the South China Sea has caught the attention of all parties. Hereby, I want to stress the following. For a long time, with the concerted efforts of China and the other coastal states of the South China Sea, the overall situation in the South China Sea has remained generally stable. The freedom of navigation has not been affected because of some disputes. Standing firm to safeguard territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests, China has always insisted on peaceful settlement of disputes through negotiations and consultations. We maintain that differences have to be controlled through rules and mechanisms. We hold that mutual benefit and win-win can only be achieved through cooperation. We shall resolutely safeguard freedom of navigation and overflight and peace and stability in the South China Sea. We have reached consensus with the ASEAN countries to settle disputes through bilateral dialogues and negotiations. China and ASEAN are capable of preserving peace and stability in the South China Sea through cooperation. Countries outside should play a constructive role in this regard, not the other way around. The South China Sea issue has become overheated because of the provocations of certain countries for their own selfish interests. The South China Sea arbitration, initiated by the Philippines under the guise of the international law, in nature, denies China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests in the South China Sea. The purpose of the Philippines is to cover up its illegal occupancy of some reefs near the Niger Islands by the Philippines. I would like to emphasize that the arbitration is not applicable to the disputes between China and the Philippines, as the two sides have signed a bilateral agreement and made negotiations the only way to a solution in the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. Moreover, territorial sovereignty issues are beyond the scope of the UNCLOS, and the disputes raised by the Philippines on maritime delimitation has been excluded by the declaration of the Chinese government in 2006. By unilaterally initiating the arbitration, the Philippines has breached its bilateral agreement with China and violated the provisions in the UNCLOS and other rules of the international laws established on the basis of illegal acts and appeals of the Philippines. The arbitral tribunal has no jurisdiction over China. Therefore, the arbitration award is not binding on China. The Chinese government has repeatedly stated that it shall not accept nor participate in the so-called arbitration, and shall not recognize or honor the award. This is not a violation of the international law. On the contrary, it is the proper exercise of the rights entitled by the international law. It is an act of compliance and maintenance of the international law. We have also noticed that some countries employ the international law only when it is convenient and ignore when it is not. On the one hand, they implement the so-called freedom of navigation program by openly showing military muscles in the South China Sea. On the other hand, they support allies confronting China, forcing China to accept and honor the arbitration award. China firmly opposes such a behavior. We do not make trouble, but we have no fear of trouble. China will not bear with the arbitration award, nor will it allow any infringement on its sovereignty and security interests, or stay indifferent to the irresponsible behavior of some countries in and around the South China Sea. I want to repeat what I said at this forum last year. The Chinese people and the Chinese military always believe in truth rather than heresy. We buy truth rather than force. Meanwhile, I reiterate that our policy on the South China Sea remains unchanged. China has the wisdom and the patience to resolve the disputes through peaceful negotiations. We also believe that other countries concerned have the same wisdom and patience to walk on the path of peace along with China. Any countries not directly concerned are not allowed to sabotage our path of peace for selfish gains. Ladies and gentlemen, China has declared its two centennial goals. We are striving to realize the China dream, a dream of rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. It is in consistency with the beautiful dreams of the peoples in Asia-Pacific region and around the world. It is our common aspiration to build towards an Asia-Pacific family of lasting peace and common prosperity. As a veteran, my duty is to fight and win. And my wish is to maintain peace. This is equally true for the soldiers of any country. I always believe that shaking hands is better than clenching fists. Opening hearts is better than opening fire. The two world wars give nothing other than miserable and heartbroken lessons to the mankind. We must take history as a mirror, cherish the peace of the world today, and preserve the hard-won situation of peace and stability in the Asian-Pacific region. With furtherance of globalization, people are bound together by a shared future. Let's join hands to build towards an Asia-Pacific community of common destiny, safeguard Asia-Pacific security, prosperity, and stability, and make the world a better place.
Admiral Sun Ju, thank you very much for your very comprehensive and well-prepared statement that was delivered in exactly 30 minutes. So thank you very much for that. We already have 20 questions, so I won't seek to summarize any further the statements made, but move towards through these comments and questions as quickly as possible so that we can give the three ministers a chance fully to reply to the points made. And I will pay most attention to those who haven't yet had a chance to take the floor. So let me first ask Bill Emmett. Your mic is on. Unless you turned it off.
Okay, I have another microphone. Thank you very much, Chairman. My question is for Admiral Sun. Admiral, you clearly stated that China is opposed to the forward area air defense deployment in the Korean Peninsula. I wonder if you could kindly explain further your reasons for opposing this deployment and tell us if there is what form of cooperation you would consider with other parties, including the United States, for the purposes of missile defense and the North Korean nuclear issue.
Thank you very much. Carl Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions to the Admiral. You talked about the Philippines' illegal occupation of features. Could you please provide some details? Did they throw off Chinese military or administrators from these features at any point in time, or were these features just left unoccupied? But the second part of my question is does China have any obligations under UNCLOS? Because when you signed it, you took on the responsibility to accept the dispute settlement mechanism dealing with entitlements, not the issues you've raised and have distorted the Philippines' position. And it is therefore up to the arbitral tribunal to determine whether the complaints made against China fall within their jurisdiction, and they did so. So you're really saying that you have no obligations under a dispute settlement mechanism that you agreed to accept, and therefore you reject the ability of UNCLOS to be applied. Thank you.
Professor Langxin Zhang. Sorry, you perhaps need a hand mic as well. Oh, now it's on.
Okay. Thank you very much. One question for Admiral Sun, one for Monsieur Le Tourien. You have emphasized that China stressed the importance of cultural dialogue as the genuine relationship, as a foundation, genuine relationship of security relations. And as you can see, this dialogue like this hardly even mention those topics as you want to explain. Nobody talk about OBO, One Belt, One Road. Nobody's talk about cultural dialogue. Do you think that it's a little cultural condescending attitude here? Now, for Monsieur Le Drian, what confidence the French government have actually in the role played by the United States? The French used to call hyperpuissance in the Asian Pacific security issues. As you know, the United States is neither member of the region nor a member of the UNCLOS. What General de Gaulle may think today.
And from the Philippines, Dr. Rommel Banlao.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a question to Admiral Sun and to General Vin. To Admiral Sun, as you all know, we have a new president right now, and he expressed interest to resume bilateral talks with China. What are China's expectations from the Philippines to make this work? And what efforts will China exert in order to make bilateral talks work? And that is related to my question to General Vin. Do you think, General Vin, bilateral talks will work? Thank you.
And from Vietnam, Dr. Win Thi Lan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to have two questions to the Admiral, please. My first question is, as freedom of navigation is echo and support in all the speech yesterday and today, I just would like to seek your explanation on the current understanding of China on the right of innocent passage, freedom of navigation, and overflight, particularly the right enjoyed by foreign warships. Are there any rights subject to restriction, except those has been provided for under UNCLOS? And my second question is that in the speech made by the Minister of Defense of France, he made a remark that there no substantial progress has made to the COC consultation progress. I just would like to seek your advice on which factors will help to accelerate the COC conclusion in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. And from Japan, Dr. Sechiro Takagaki.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a one-year-old question to Admiral Sun. At this very forum, 1 year ago, Admiral Sun concluded his response to questions mostly dealing with South China Sea, 信不信,看行动. Trust me or not, look at actions. I'd like to hear Admiral Sun's assessment after a year since that statement, whether or not China succeeded in strengthening or enhancing trust in China among its neighbors. And if you think so, I'd like you to tell us concrete actions which contributed to the enhancement of trust in China. And I'd like to raise the same question to General Vin from Vietnam, whether or not Chinese actions raised your trust in China or not. Thank you.
And Josh Rogan.
Thank you. Admiral Sun, last month, President Xi Jinping announced in remarks in the PLA Daily that China's military budget would grow by the slowest rate in over 6 years. He attributed this to mounting pressure from the economic downturn. My question is, how does the PLA leadership view President Xi's decision to slash the growth of its military budget? And will you be able to continue the PLA's expansion in the South China Sea, given these mounting economic and budgetary problems? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think what I'll do now is give Minister Le Drian a chance to answer the one or two questions asked of him, Minister Vin the one question I think asked of him, and then invite Admiral Sun to answer on BMD in Korea, on the Philippines and UNCLOS, on freedom of navigation, and on the Chinese military budget. We do want to go back to the audience again, so keep your answers crisp, please. Monsieur Le Drian first.
Yes, briefly. Admiral Sun, of course, is the star here, so I will leave him all the time he needs to answer the many questions put to him. I didn't fully grasp the comments that were made, that were addressed to me. You were asking about France's role and behavior in the Indo-Pacific region. What I can say is that in this region, as I underscored in my speech, the legal norms and the rigorous respect of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea is essential. I also have noted that the United States has not signed UNCLOS. I already knew this. However, I believe that the law of the sea applies everywhere in the Pacific, in the Mediterranean, in the Atlantic, in the Arctic, and any breach of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea can have consequences in all the world's seas. So France is very vigilant when it comes to compliance with UNCLOS. France itself applies UNCLOS, as I said. The United States is a coastal power and is directly interested in these matters, but I don't see why this is an issue. What I do know is that we need peaceful resolution of territorial disputes. We fully agree with this approach. And that is why we hope that the code of conduct, which has not been progressing, will move forward so that there's some mechanism for regional dialogue in ASEAN, and this is what we call for. And this was raised in the question that was put to me. In the last 2 years, there has not been any progress on this.
Can you solve your problems bilaterally with China?
Có một câu hỏi đối với tôi là
My answer is yes, we got some differences between the two countries. Say, for example, the Hoàng Sa or Pra-Self issue, that should be bilateral. And when it comes to an issue involving many countries like Trường Sa or Spratly issues, it is not only between Vietnam and China. So we can negotiate bilaterally, but we need to take other parties into the negotiation. And we have other, issues larger than territorial integrities, like maritime security, which is really regional and international involved. So I would like to stress that bilateral, multilateral, or multi-party, international, whatever, we need to uphold the rules, transparency, respect for the regional interests and international community interests. And bilateral or multilaterally, we highly expect an attitude that is constructive and contributing to the process of negotiations, peace of parties that are involved in the dispute. I have another question that the actions now we are seeing in South China Sea enhance the bilateral and also the confidence between the two countries. So I just refer to one of the quoting in my speech that Vietnam attaches importance and try to enhance the cooperation with China for the confidence building. I have a little time because I know that Admiral Sun has more questions than me, so I give him more time. Vâng, xin mời ngài Tôn Kiến Quốc ạ. Vâng, tôi đây.
Over the past few days as a delegate
Vừa ngày qua thì
to some of the speeches given by the delegates with great patience, including those who had different opinions with us. And then I got these questions. It's my second time to attend this dialogue. On May the 31st last year, I responded to 13 questions of all 15 questions were targeted at me, and the South China Sea issue was highlighted. And many of the questions I got just now are about South China Sea. Actually, the many differences we have concern South China Sea issue as well. So today I cannot help myself but to respond to this issue again and to discuss some of the issues with you. And my answer today, I believe, should be a detailed and systematic one for your convenience of understanding. It is a holistic perspective. If you do not look at the whole picture, but only focus on one point, it will likely lead to a understanding that is not loyal to the facts or is not comprehensive. In terms of the South China Sea issue, as a Chinese person, especially a Chinese person in uniform, I can hardly smile.
Because all of us believe that the South China Sea has been China's territory since the ancient times. What is happening now in the South China Sea hurts the heart of every Chinese. I believe that when we talk about the South China Sea issue, if we only look at historic facts or the reality, we cannot find a legitimate, justified solution and conclusion that are accepted by all. So we have to both look at the history and the reality. Can we come with a justified conclusion? In particular, can we find a legitimate and workable solution? First, China is the first to discover, name, develop, and administrate the South China Sea. Its sovereignty and relevant rights and interests of the South China Sea have endured a long time and as without any interruption. It is known to all of us. In addition, over a long period of time, China's rights and interests in the South China Sea have not been challenged. In the 1940s, the Chinese government put forward the dotted line of the South China Sea and announced to the world, it is a solemn and legally binding declaration of China's sovereignty and historic rights on the South China Sea. In 1946, in accordance with the Potsdam Proclamation and the Cairo Declaration and United Nations resolutions, the Chinese government sent warships to take over the Taiping Island and Yongxin Island, among other islands in the South China Sea, returned by Japan. The Taiping Island is the only island in the South China Sea that has stationed troops and is inhabited by people. Over a long period of time, there has been no controversy around the sovereignty of South China Sea. And it has been recorded by words or pictures by many countries, including the United States. Third, in the 1960s, after gas and natural gas and oil was discovered in the South China Sea. In the beginning of the 1970s, when China was caught in difficulties both within and outside China, the Philippines was the first country to invade the South China Sea, or the island and reefs of the South China Sea. I was indignant about it as a Chinese serviceman. Unfortunately, the Chinese naval force was not capable enough to deal with it. In addition, the Taiwan Authority did nothing and didn't play its due role about it. Then, at the beginning of the 1980s, with great tolerance and good faith, China put forward the proposals of shelving differences and developing together, and maintained the peace and stability in the South China Sea. Fourth, some countries keep expanding their military invasion and construction activities. They didn't answer China's appeal for common development. Rather, they developed unilaterally. They even didn't allow China to develop, and alleged they are bullied by China. Over the past few years, there are indeed some cases where small countries were bullied by big countries, but China is by no means the bullied. However, in the South China Sea, some hegemonic powers embolden small countries to make provocations against big countries. Over a long period of time, some countries are engaged in construction activities to prepare for war and keep invading the islands and reefs. That is why the sovereign interests of China in the South China Sea has been greatly damaged. China's construction activities in the 7 islands are the necessary response by China. Fifth, China is doing the construction activities in its own territories. There are many for civilian uses. They have nothing to do with changing the status quo, and nobody has the right to point fingers at China. Of course, according to the levels of threat, we have to have some military defense constructions. Sixth, actually, China has the most ships sailing in the South China Sea shipping lane. If the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea is compromised, China is the largest victim. China's sovereignty and the rights and interests in the South China Sea does not and will not compromise the freedom of navigation. Should the freedom of navigation be undermined, China wouldn't be to blame, and we can wait and see. Seventh, now we're witnessing an escalation of tensions in the South China Sea. It is because some countries are only considering their selfish interests. And some big countries are making threats, and we have witnessed a lot of military exercises. And those are true threats to the freedom of navigation and peace and stability in the region. Eighth, I want to spend more time about the arbitration case in the South China Sea. The crux of the dispute between China and the Philippines is the territorial issue because of the illegal invasion and occupation of the Philippines of some islands and reefs of the South China Sea. And we have also seen the maritime limitation issue. That is why China has decided not to participate or accept the so-called award. In addition, territorial issue is not subject to UNCLOS. Maritime delimitation and historical rights have long been excluded by the Declaration on Optional Exceptions made by China. Over 30 countries have already made similar declarations. The Philippines has initiated the arbitration unilaterally without getting the approval of China and tries to impose its will on China. Just now, some delegates mentioned the new president of the Philippines, Mr. Duterte, and he mentioned the wishes to resolve disputes through bilateral cooperation or negotiations. Our door to the bilateral negotiation and consultations is always wide open. We hope that the new Filipino administration can shake off the burden of the last administration and remove the obstacles of China-Philippines development. And please give me another minute. Yesterday, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Carter, talked about the self-isolating of China, and I want to talk about it, even though it has not been asked. This time, I had a lot of good interactions with many defense ministers and the chiefs demand. Most of them are warmer and more friendly to me than last year, and they respect me and trust me more than last year. And we have not received so many questions about the South China Sea than last year. In fact, China is an open, inclusive, and responsible country. It is a participator, constructor, and contributor to the current international system and a firm maintainer of regional and world peace and stability. And we are going on a path of security which is inclusive, shared, and win-win. We were not isolated in the past. We are not isolated, and we will not be isolated in the future. Actually, I am worried some people and countries are still looking at China with the Cold War mentality and prejudice. They may build a wall in their mind and end up isolating themselves. I want to talk about the international law. What?
Could I ask you to, in a moment, answer? No, we have to go back to the audience, as I mentioned earlier. So what I will do is go back to the audience, and when I come back, the one question that still remains to be answered is on your views on whether the Republic of Korea has the right to defend itself against a prospective DPRK with ballistic missiles, with its own ballistic missile defense. Does the Republic of Korea have a right to defend itself? But we'll come back to that after I've asked 3 or 4 more people to answer their question, to ask their question, to make certain we have a full debate. And so if I could now ask Major General Retired Gong Chang-fu from China to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Deputy Minister of National Defense of Vietnam, General Yuan. In his recent visit to your country, President Obama announced the United States will completely lift the arms embargo against Vietnam. So does it mean that the United States will become the main partnership for defense cooperation with the foreign countries? And do you expect that you can get whatever weapons you want to buy from the U.S.? And can you share with me, or the audience here, your view on the motivations for the closer cooperation between Vietnam and the United States? Thank you.
Thank you. And Professor Wu Jingbu from China.
Thank you. My question is for the French Defense Minister. Yesterday and today, we heard a lot of talk about the importance of abiding by international law. As someone already mentioned, ironically, the U.S. is the only major country that has not yet joined the UN Commission on the Law at Sea. And also, the U.S. launched freedom of navigation operation in a global context doesn't really conform to the international law. So as a U.S. ally, France or European Union in general, how can you encourage the U.S. to join UNCLOS and also to improve, to correct its freedom of navigation operation so as to not violate the international law? Thank you.
And from the Republic of Korea, Dr. Chung Min Lee. Yes, it is on.
It is now. Oh, it is. Okay. Thank you, John. I have one question for Admiral Sun. With all due respect, Admiral, the reason why many Asian countries don't trust China is because of the PLA's military stances in the East China Sea, in the South China Sea, and around the Korean Peninsula, and in your borders with many countries. So if you want to be trusted in China, in Asia, make sure that you become less aggressive and much more transparent. My question to you, sir, is this. North Korea has conducted 4 nuclear tests. It is on the verge of miniaturizing nuclear warheads. It says it may have also SLBM capabilities on top of biological and chemical weapons. What have you done, the PLA, to decrease tensions by convincing your North Korean partners that they must reduce tensions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I need to close this session in 5 minutes because ministers have to go to bilateral meetings and some have to make an early departure. So we cannot answer all questions. So I will ask each person to answer one question. So Admiral Soon first, could you just answer the one question about the DPRK and what your views are of how the Republic of Korea can defend itself against any possible threat from the DPRK? I think that's one question that is important for us to settle here. Thank you very much. Admiral Soon first.
With regard to DPRK, China has made, because of time limit, I will say very briefly, we've made a lot of efforts and we've been under a lot of pressure. Actually, what we have done is for the purpose of safeguarding the peace and stability of Northeast Asia and the interests of all countries in the region, including the interests of China. A denuclearized peninsula, a peaceful and stable peninsula is in the best interests of China. Of course, China, including the Chinese ministry, have been doing a lot of work in this regard. I will not list what we have done. Now I will answer the question about the THAAD system. As a serviceman, I am more than clear what it means. The U.S. deploying THAAD in the Republic of Korea far exceeds the scope, the necessity of defending DPRK. It will undermine China's strategic and security interests, so we stand firmly opposed the deployment. You only give me 1 minute. I can answer more questions as long as you give me time.
Good for Vice Minister Vin.
Vừa qua thì Tổng thống Obama đã tuyên bố dỡ bỏ.
Announced recently the embargoes of weapons against Vietnam. So with regard to this decision, we welcome and we think that it is a right and positive decision. My personal perspective is that it is a little bit, late. It should have been done. It should have been made earlier. The significance of the removal of the embargo of weapons show all of us the respect for Vietnam, the enhance of trust between the two countries, especially for Vietnam, because now Vietnam and the U.S. is the comprehensive partner. We have the comprehensive partnership. So in terms of defense relations, like many others, the U.S. is one of the important partners of U.S., but we haven't got any decision of buying weapons from the U.S. Thank you. Xin mời Bộ trưởng.
Yes, thank you. There was only one question for me. I will be brief. I will give a brief answer to this question, i.e., how can we encourage the United States to sign the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea? This is something that we hope will happen. I was a member of the French delegation when the Montego Bay was being negotiated a long time ago, and the U.S. was very active in drafting the text, and so we would hope that they will ratify it. I think a lot of large parts of the U.S. administration are working towards that. I think there are some negotiations in the U.S. Senate for the United States to sign the convention alongside so many other countries of the world. It is important to comply with this convention in favor of the freedom of circulation. The United States respects customary law, which is also guaranteeing freedom of navigation, and so the convention just consolidates this.
Ministerial statements and an excellent discussion. Could you please thank all of our ministers for their engagement and return to the hall at 11:30 for the concluding plenary. Thank you very much indeed.